It's time for this young loggerhead turtle to go to work. We can tether turtles in these little cloth harnesses. Put them into this tank and dull swimming place. University of North Carolina biologist Ken Lohman studies sea turtles that are programmed from birth for an extraordinary journey. Mother turtles buried the eggs on the beach and then returned to the sea, and the eggs hatch about 50 to 60 days later. The benefits and disadvantages of globalization are the subject of ongoing debate. The downside to globalization can be seen in the increased risk for the transmission of diseases. Globalization has, of course, led to great good, too. Richer nations now can come to the aid of poorer nations in crisis. Increasing diversity in many countries has meant more opportunity to learn about and celebrate other cultures. While advances in agricultural science have always been critical to ensuring we help feed the world, its impact and importance is even greater now as population grows at a rapid rate and the availability of arable land steadily declines. Science and technology solutions are essential to meeting growing demand for food, maintaining market competitiveness, and adapting to land mitigating risks. Nature offers no greater splendor than the starry sky on a clear, dark night. Silent, timeless, jeweled with the constellations of ancient myth and legend, the night sky has inspired wonder throughout the ages, a wonder that leads our imaginations far from the confines of Earth and the pace of the present day out into boundless space and cosmic time itself. The survey found that the statistical chances of someone from a poor background being accepted at one of the country's most respected universities, are far lower than those of a student from a wealthy family. This means that the inequalities in society are likely to be passed down from one generation to the next. A split would have appeared in wolf populations, he says. Those wolves that feared humans and those that didn't. So this would have facilitated, I think, the domestication process, at which point humans deliberately took wolves as pets. But that domestication process, France says, may have happened more than once, first in the West in Europe, and again in the Far East in Asia. Nell says that, in order to seek protection from their furry foes, birds actually prefer to build their nests in plots of swamp with a resident alligator. In fact, in one study a graduate student planted fake alligators. The birds seemed to prefer to build nests close to them. Where there's a water source, there are alligators, so it's sort of this mode of protection around these colonies. History is selective. What history books tell us about the past is not everything that happened, but what historians have selected. They cannot put in everything. Choices have to be made. Choices must similarly be made about which aspects of the past should be formally taught to the next generation in the shape of school history lessons. An economic depression is a period of sustained long-term downturn in economic activity in one or more economies. It is more severe than a recession, which is a slowdown in economic activity over the course of a normal business cycle. Economic depressions are characterized by their length and by abnormally large increases in unemployment rate. The speaker reminisces about his views of the English Revolution when he was a student and how it seemed quite clear which side he was on, the aristocrats, not the Puritans. Later he realized there was more to it than that, and there were several ways of interpreting the revolution, as a struggle between the king and parliament, as a class war, or as an unpredictable situation without clear sides. In 1861, Matthew Brady, a well-known portrait photographer, approached President Lincoln requesting permission to move freely around the country photographing the Civil War. Lincoln granted him permission to travel anywhere with the Union armies, and his record of this conflict brought home to millions the horrors of war. As introverts are thinking, they reach back into long-term memory to locate information. An introvert will often compare old and new experiences when making a decision, which slows the processing down but leads to carefully thought-out decisions. This means that introverts have an active dialogue with themselves and usually walk around with man-thoughts in their minds. A study found that the research funded by the soft drinks industry had different results from research funded by other sources, and went on to suggest that they may have been biased by the research itself. The whole point of the scientific methods is to ensure the research results are not influenced by the source of funding.
Aboriginal people are believed to have arrived as early as 60,000 years ago, and evidence of Aboriginal art in Australia dates back at least 30,000 years. Several states and territories had their origins as penal colonies, with the first British convicts arriving at Sydney Cove in 1788. sad truth is that happy sounds are infectious. Now comes research that at least partly explains why. It was published this week in the Journal of Neuroscience. A British research team played various sounds, including laughter, to people who are having their brains scanned by a functional MRI machine. All the sounds activated the motor cortical region of the brain, an area preparing facial muscles to move. The scientists say this is the first documented instance of nectar that attracts a particular animal-assisted being produced outside of a nectary. In fact, the observed nectar bleeding might actually be an early system that evolved to include the nectaries found in other plants today. Surgical site infections are caused by bacteria that get in through incisions made during surgery. They threaten the lives of millions of patients each year and contribute to the spread of antibiotic resistance. In low and middle-income countries, 11% of patients who undergo surgery are infected in the process. We understand the importance of supporting and restoring biodiversity, and we are teaming up with the world's leading molecular biologists, technologists, conservation biologists, conservation organizations, ethicists, and thought leaders to call for intended consequences to help us safely use all of the available tools that can provide the advantage we need to turn the tide on species loss. Prolonged exposure to loud noise alters how the brain processes speech, potentially increasing the difficulty in distinguishing speech sounds, according to neuroscientists. Exposure to intensely loud sounds leads to permanent damage of the hair cells, which act as sound receivers in the ear. Once damaged, the hair cells do not grow back, leading to noise-induced hearing loss. The terms summary and abstract are often used interchangeably, resulting in some confusion. This problem arises because there are two distinct types of abstracts: descriptive and informative. The informative abstract is another name for a summary. The descriptive is not. The descriptive abstract is usually only 2 or 3 sentences in length. Hence, it is not a summary or very informative. The slight decline in drug overdose deaths in 2018 coincides with Chinese regulations on the powerful opioid carfentanil. Rather than the result of domestic U.S. efforts to curb the epidemic, a new analysis reveals what many, including President Donald Trump, perceived as a decline in overdose deaths in 2018, appears to be a return to the historic exponential curve. European wildcats, thought to be extinct 50 or so years ago in the Jura Mountains, have since recolonized part of their former territory. This resurgence in an area occupied by domestic cats has gone hand in hand with genetic crosses between the two species. A team of biologists modeled the interactions between the two species to predict that hybridization will entail the irreversible genetic replacement of wildcats. Researchers have found a way to convert the aromatic substance vanillin into a redox-active electrolyte material for liquid batteries. The technology is an important step towards ecologically sustainable energy storage. University of Adelaide researchers have uncovered fundamental new information about the malting characteristics of barley grains. They say their finding could pave the way to more stable brewing processes or new malts for craft brewers. Published in the Nature publication Scientific Reports, the researchers discovered a new link between one of the key enzymes involved in malt production for brewing and a specific tissue layer within the barley grain. The power of the sun, wind, and sea may soon combine to produce clean-burning hydrogen fuel, according to researchers. A team integrated water purification technology into a new proof-of concept design for a seawater electrolyzer, which uses an electric current to split apart the hydrogen and oxygen in water molecules. New research identifies a process that might have been key in producing the first organic molecules on Earth about 4 billion years ago, before the origin of life. The process, which is similar to what might have occurred in some ancient underwater hydrothermal vents, may also have relevance to the search for life elsewhere in the universe.
Injury or disease that afflicts a relatively small number of brain cells causes a chain reaction that stops activity across a vast network of neural circuits, according to new research. The study may help to explain why people can suffer from temporary but severe loss of cognitive function in cases of traumatic brain injury or disease. There are two main types of market research. Quantitative research involves collecting a lot of information by using techniques such as questionnaires and other forms of survey. Qualitative research involves working with smaller samples of consumers, often asking them to discuss products and services while researchers take notes about what they have to say. Credit unions are nonprofit organizations that were imported to the United States from Germany in the early 1900s. They were regulated in 1934 by the Federal Credit Union Act, which limits membership to groups having a common bond of occupation or association. Groups from particular geographical areas also were eligible to join credit unions. This course provides an introduction to the history and development of the British legal system. Its aim is to describe the evolution of the common law of England, the legal system of England, and to introduce you to the study of constitutions as law, and to the legal aspects of constitutional systems of government. This is an extremely useful resource, which ranks books and academic papers on the subject not only in terms of their reliability, but also their readability. As a result, it is likely to save students time and effort that would otherwise have been spent working through a lot of dense texts before finding the one they really need. Closure activities allow participants to consolidate learning, say goodbye to group mates, and attend to any unfinished business prior to the ending of the group experience. Generally, these activities involve some reflection upon what has been learned or accomplished during the preceding time together and a sharing of those thoughts or insights with other participants. In multilingual countries, code mixing, the use of more than one variety in the same utterance or sentence, and code switching, the use of different languages or varieties between sentences, is common and natural. Despite its frequency, or perhaps because of it, some scholars and self-appointed guardians of linguistic morality view both code mixing and code switching as a sign of linguistic deficiency. Researchers have found that divorce has different kinds of negative impacts on the planet, including higher demand for resources and a lower rate of efficiency in the use of household resources. People have been talking about how to protect the environment and combat climate change, but divorce is an overlooked factor that needs to be considered. Northcote Parkinson, a British writer, formulated Parkinson's rule. Work expands to fill the time allotted to it. Or, conversely, the amount of work completed is in inverse proportion to the number of people employed. Simply said, if you have an hour to do a 5-minute job, it will take an hour to do it. A large number of people accomplish less work than a smaller number of people. Fence, humanly erected barrier between two divisions of land, used to mark a legal or other boundary, to keep animals or people in or out, and sometimes as an ornament. In newly settled lands, fences are usually made of materials at hand, example, stone, earth, or wood. It seems that when it comes to love, men and women are designed to misconstrue, misread, and misunderstand one another and themselves. You discover that in fact they make good sense. Being a deluded romantic is often the best way to make a good, biologically successful, choice about a potential partner on the basis. The grid-based infrastructure enables large-scale scientific applications to be run on distributed resources. However, in practice, grid resources are not very easy to use for the end users who have to learn how to generate security credentials. There is an imminent need to provide transparent access to these resources so that the end users are shielded from the complicated details. Social media are playing an increasingly important role as information sources for travelers. The goal of this study is to investigate the extent to which social media appear in search engine results in the context of travel-related searches. It also provides evidence for challenges faced by traditional providers of travel-related information.
For diplomacy, the starting point must be that globalization requires bridges and removes barriers. A policy of containment is a difficult strategy in the age of the fiber optic cable, the jumbo jet, and the satellite dish. There will always be the exception, such as the murderous regime in Iraq, where the only safe strategy is to keep it in the isolation ward until it accepts the norms of international behavior, or the military dictatorship in Burma, which has persistently failed to respond to dialogue. It takes two to critically engage. DeLone and Klein's model has been criticized by some authors. Indeed, this model is specific to contexts of voluntary use of information technology. The usage variable remains a success variable of information systems if the user himself decides to adopt or reject the technology. However, for mandatory uses, such as for ERP systems, the use of the technology is obvious. The success of information systems cannot, therefore, be measured by usage. Clemenson wanted to see if claims of question dodging actually held up, historically, not necessarily in the unique case of Trump. So Clemenson analyzed the transcripts of 14 presidential debates from 1996 to 2012. Overall, he found 51 accusations of question dodging, 26 by Dems, 25 by Republicans. They controlled for the bird's age, sex, body size, and species, and they found that the hunted specimens' brains were actually 5% smaller, on average, than the brains of birds that died by other means. The surprising thing is that, if you make a similar kind of analysis of liver or heart size, there is absolutely no difference there. So this is specific to the brain. Psychologist Saho Takagi, a graduate student at Kyoto University in Japan, strolls into one of Japan's many cat cafes. These establishments allow customers to pay an hourly fee for the chance to cuddle some cats. They're popular in Japan because so many apartment buildings forbid pet ownership. But Takagi isn't the typical customer. She's not there for feline affection, but to probe their minds. Twitter, a social network, will reportedly join forces with Bloomberg, a media company, to produce a 24-hour video news service. Twitter has made strides in adding users in recent quarters, but not in boosting profits. Jack Dorsey, a co-founder who recently returned as CEO, introduced limited live video broadcasts at the site, which were seen by 45 meters unique viewers in the first quarter of 2017. Unlike the iconic Nazca lines, most of which are only visible from overhead, the older Paracas glyphs were laid down on hillsides, making them visible to villages below. The two cultures also pursued different artistic subjects. Nazca lines most often consist of lines or polygons, but many of the newfound Paracas figures depict humans. In most animals, the brain is located in the head, protected by the skull and close to the primary sensory apparatus of vision, hearing, taste, and olfaction. In humans, it is an organ of thought. While all vertebrates have a brain, invertebrates have either a centralized brain or collections of individual ganglia. By beginning so early, he knows that he has plenty of time to do thoroughly all the work he can be expected to do. All this work having been finished in good time, he has a long interval of rest in the evening before the timely hour when he goes to bed. After a sound night's rest, he rises early next morning in good health and spirits for the labors of a new day. Trump has threatened to declare China a currency manipulator, but experts say he has little legal or economic basis to take such a step. He has also threatened to impose a tariff of up to 45% on Chinese imports if Beijing doesn't behave, a move that could lead to a trade war and damage the economies of both nations. But they did find something that had a much bigger impact on wildlife: habitat quality. The best predictor of wildlife abundance was not human activity, but factors like forest connectivity, nearby housing density, and the amount of adjacent agriculture. The results were published in the Journal of Applied Ecology. That tsunamis could provide crucial information about the habitability of ancient Mars. The first one occurred when the planet must have been relatively warm and amenable for life, because it carved out backwash channels as it returned to the sea. By contrast, the planet had become much cooler by the time the second tsunami hit.
The ancient Romans had many of the same problems that we have today. One of these was the unpleasantness of living in high-rise blocks. Even in the 1st century AD, the Emperor Augustus put a limit of about 24 meters on apartment blocks, but a century or two later 5- and 6-story blocks still quite common. Clouds of gases formed in the atmosphere, consisting of methane, ammonia, and water vapor, until they too cooled and the water vapor condensed into rain. This rain fell for thousands of years. It formed seas together with water that was trapped in the rocks and released as vapor through volcanoes. It's important to bring to justice the actual perpetrators of atrocities or war crimes, but it's a different matter if courts are being used, as I think they are in this case, as a kind of propaganda exercise against colonialism.
Like, share and subscribe the channel for upcoming videos and also press the bell icon for notifications.